So good
Great.
afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Talk Photography. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm absolutely fine. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you so much for joining us today. After talking to you last week and getting to know you a little bit better, I will confess that it was then I read your article. I'd seen the images, but I hadn't read the past article. But you and I had chatted about it and shared some stories from the underground. So I'm really excited that you is part of today's presentation. But before we get going, Mike, it's important that we just tell a little people about who you are as a photographer. Did you want me to do that, or you can just share a little bit with them?
I'm happy just to kick off.
You go for it, bud.
If you're happy with that, Jay.
Yeah, more than happy.
Okay, great. So this talk is it's about permissions, trust, access, and opportunity, and shooting great picture stories. And myself, I'm a photojournalist and documentary photographer. I've also done a lot of corporate photography, and I make films too. And you can see more of my work on my website. I think Jay's put the link in, so you feel free to go there and have a look. So I've chosen 4 stories to illustrate how permissions, trust, access, and opportunity can be key elements of shooting great picture stories. And that's what I've been concentrating on here. I've been looking at a set I shot in my early 20s on the London Underground, which was published last year by Hoxton Mini Press, and Jay featured it. At people affected by the chemical defoliant Agent Orange in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, the Ashaninka Indians in the Amazon, and pirates in the South China Seas.
Brilliant.
So here we go.
Okay, so we won't waste any time, Mike, because we know we've got a lot to get through. So let me make you the presenter. So
great.
That's coming over to you now, and I'll let you know when we can see everything. And just a reminder to you all your questions for Mike, please pop them through the question panel. As we said, Mike's going to run through his presentation, and we've allowed plenty of time for your questions. Mike, I can see the first London Underground image nice and clear, and I can hear you clearly. So I'm going to leave it all to you. Thanks, bud.
Okay, brilliant. All right. Okay, so here we go. So photography in the underground is a bit like street photography. Each encounter is a new situation to be negotiated. And in every situation, you have to ask yourself, where are you going to put yourself? And what is the moment you're looking for? It's a background thing, really, but it's something to bear in mind all the time. At that time, in the 1970s, photography in the underground was not allowed. Underground staff would stop you if they saw you taking pictures. So I would put the camera away whenever they appeared. And for permission from people in the picture, sometimes I used to, it's just eye contact and a nod to say, I'm not a threat to you, you can trust me. Sometimes I'd ask, and if people were okay, I'd shoot. And sometimes it's just, you have the opportunity. You see the picture and you take it. Perhaps you catch their eye and perhaps you don't. And that's the case with this one in the Holborn station. They were completely engaged in their relationship, and then they parted company without seeing me. This picture is the last train on the Northern Line. These guys were out for the count, no need to ask for permission. I saw them as the train pulled into the station. I got in and sat opposite, and I just prayed they wouldn't wake up. The shooting on film in low light, shutter speed is key. And with the train moving, I knew it'd be hard to get a sharp picture. And then as the train drew into the station to a stop, the advert opposite, the couple smiled in through the window, and that made the picture for me. These people were sitting opposite me, and I think I was on the train, and they got in and sat down. I took up the camera and took the picture, and they didn't actually object or assent, but it was a picture I wanted to have, and I was glad to have it. This is a ticket queue, sorry, at Oxford Circus Station. And that was an image I wanted to have, but quite a lot of people in the queue didn't want that picture taken, so I had to wait for some time, and also for a moment that I liked, so it actually worked. This was a personal project, and in a way, I was honing my craft as in my just early 20s. And on the days I chose to photograph underground, I would get on and off the trains on whim and explore the vast network, looking for interesting moments, like here on a crowded rush hour train. Sometimes it was the incongruity of what I saw that caught my eye, like this one. And sometimes people were happy to participate, like here. In this image, the man in the middle is blind, and that really was the point of the picture. Everybody else was rushing past, and I wanted to capture his stillness with a slow shutter speed. And at that time, a lot of the trains had seating arranged so that people were opposite each other, and it was easy to lean forward and ask if people were happy to be photographed. And I liked the way the father was holding his daughter's toes. The doors at the end of each carriage had sliding windows, and when you dropped them down while the train was moving, you got a really strong blast. These two friends were happy to have their picture taken. This was on a moving train, so I was glad to get a sharp picture. The fastest film available at that time was Kodak Tri-X or Ilford FP4, both at ISO 400. However, if you overdeveloped the film, you could boost the ISO up to 800 or even 1600 if you were careful, as I did here. And I was pleased to get this picture of a young mother with a child on a moving train. Sometimes you only have one stop to make your picture before the subject gets off or someone comes to stand in front of you. After some time, I started taking a set of small prints with me to show staff, and then they'd generally be happy to cooperate. This was at Westbourne Park in 1979, early on a Saturday afternoon of a carnival day. I'd photographed this girl with her mother getting tickets just before, and she was curious to see what I'd do next. When she stood by the gate like this, it made the picture for me. This is a bank station. The woman staff member in the middle of the picture got quite keen on my project once I'd shown her some pictures. She took me to the staff canteen for a cup of tea. And while we were in there, there was an announcement on the tannoy that someone had dropped their wallet. The staff stopped the train to fish out the wallet, and I got this unusual image, which I was pleased to get. I put this project aside in 1980 when I began my freelance photography career, and only went back to look at the set recently. I took the pictures to Hoxton Mini Press, and they published a book at the end of 2019. It's done quite well, and I was pleased with that. So really, as far as permissions were concerned with that project, it was a mixture of grabbing opportunities when they arose and building trust by showing people copies of the pictures I'd already taken, and generally enjoying myself, looking for special moments down there. And if any of you like a copy, Jay's put the link to Hoxton Mini Press in what he sent everybody. So this next set of pictures is on the Thai-Cambodian border in Vietnam. And really, the set is about being persistent in your pursuit of an idea. There's a little short background here. In 1975, at the end of the Vietnam War, a group called the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia. And during the 4 years that they were in power, more than 1 million Cambodians died. Then in 79, Vietnam defeated the Khmer Rouge regime. And as the Vietnamese advanced into Cambodia, several 100,000 Cambodians crossed the border into Thailand, into a number of sprawling refugee camps, like this one, which was called Non Mark Moon. I wanted to cover the situation, and it wasn't easy to get there, but I won't go into that all now because it'll take too long. But I managed to, for this image, I managed to find a high viewpoint to show the scale. I think I was standing on a large water tank. Many people were completely traumatized by the whole experience, like this young woman in one of the camp hospitals. Surviving members of the Khmer Rouge and their families were kept kept separate from other refugees in this camp called Sakeo, some way from the border. And life in the camps was no picnic. The border camps were awash with arms, and there was conflict between rival factions. This is a member of the Khmer Sarai in a hilltop trench. Shooting would often break out. These women were sheltering during the exchange of fire across the camp. And when the shooting stopped, the dead and wounded would be brought out. This young man had caught a bullet in the chest, and the crowd around him wanted me to take his picture. Someone had put joss sticks and some money on him to help his spirit into the next world. This young man has extensive yantra tattoos. These people believe that the magic of these tattoos can repel bullets and ward off evil. This trip to the Thai border was my first published foreign story. This was a magazine that ran the pictures. It was called Now Magazine. It was a kind of British version of Time magazine. It ran probably into the mid-80s, I think. This is a collective farm in North Vietnam transplanting rice. So having been on the Thai border, I was curious about what life was like in Vietnam. And being just 5 years after the end of the war, it was extremely difficult to get in. But I'd done some research and I decided I wanted to do a story about Agent Orange, the chemical defoliant that the Americans had used to destroy forests covering Vietnam. And there was credible evidence that a toxin called dioxin in the Agent Orange was causing serious birth defects. After a lot of digging, I tracked down an eccentric French woman in her 60s called Louise Duplot, who had worked with the resistance in Saigon during the war and was trusted by the Vietnamese. She had ignored all my letters until I sent her a set of the underground pictures, and then she invited me to see her in Oxford. It turned out she was planning a trip to Cambodia and Vietnam and invited me to come with her as her photographer. So, of course, I was delighted. We both applied for visas, but hers came through and mine didn't. And then 2 months later, she sent me a telegram saying my Vietnam visa was waiting for me in Bangkok, and I flew out straight away. And she set everything up for me with a professor I wanted to meet who had done a lot of research into the effects of Agent Orange. I traveled all over North Vietnam. I had a driver and a translator, and they took me to meet people who had been severely affected. This is a train passing on a level crossing on the way to one of the villages. This is Pam Thi Huang, age 24, with her first child, who's 20 months old. But this child can neither speak nor stand up, and he has no eyes. His father was a war veteran sprayed 3 times with Agent Orange. So here I had the trust of the family transferred to me from the medical people, so I was able to work. All of the villages we went to were some distance from Hanoi, so it was, by the time we got there, the sun was high and you couldn't get decent pictures outside with Kodachrome in the harsh light. So I tried to make the most of the opportunity by shooting portraits inside on a tripod using light from the windows or the doorway. This is Kuan. She's 4 with her mother, Phung Thi No, 25, and her father, who's 35. So Kuan has microcephalia, which means her brain is smaller than a monkey's. She's hyperactive, then sleeps, then cries in quick rotation day and night. And her father, who'd fought in the South, was sprayed many times with Agent Orange from American aircraft. And this is a doctor from the Viet Duc Hospital in Hanoi checking these 2 boys. They both have heart defects, and their father, who'd been a soldier on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, was sprayed directly with Agent Orange. And he's got chloracne, a skin condition associated with dioxin exposure. And these 2 sisters, Lien and Hien, 8 and 6, were born after their father was sprayed with Agent Orange. And they've both been born blind. Their elder sister, who was born before the father went south, was too shy to be photographed, which is a great pity because it would have been quite powerful to have had the elder sister looking into the camera with the rest of the family. She couldn't participate, so there you go. That's smaller of the 2 girls. This is Pham Wow Lo. He's got deformed hands and feet and internal abnormalities. This is an incubator in the Viet Duc Hospital. His father had been sprayed with Agent Orange during the war too, and he wasn't expected to live very long. So there's a lot more pictures in the set, but I won't show them to you because it's a bit too gruesome, and in a sense, it kind of just sums it up. But this Dutch magazine called Vriend Nederland ran the story over 13 pages, and that kind of made the whole thing worth the effort. And the story was also picked up by other magazines too, including The New Scientist in the UK. Shortly after I did this story, a group of us set up our own picture agency called Network Photographers. And as any of you who are working as photographers might be finding, freelance photography can be a lonely business. And having our own picture agency made a big difference to everyone who was in it. I think Jay may have put a link into a website network photographers online so you can see some of what the work we did. As a freelance photographer, no one employs you. You have to be a self-starter. You have to generate much of your own work, and then you start to attract commissions. So this is a story on the Ashaninka Indians in Brazil. I was interested to do some work with First Nation people in the Amazon, having already done a story on the Guayami Indians in Panama. I tracked down an aid agency called Health Unlimited who worked with the Ashaninka, and I spent 3 weeks on a tributary of the Amazon up near the border with Peru. Shortly after I got back, a BBC reporter called John Simpson, who you may know of, became their patron. And after showing John some of the pictures, he asked me if I would do a return trip with him. The plan was to do stills for the Telegraph magazine and shoot some video for the BBC. It's a long journey to where the Ashaninka are, right up by the Peruvian border, and sometimes the Amazon can feel quite forbidding. When we finally arrived at the Ashaninka village, we weren't sure if the chief would receive us, as there'd been some illegal logging in the area by outsiders. I'd brought a set of duplicate transparencies of the Ashaninka community I'd photographed a few months before, and the chief recognized the people in the pictures, and everything changed. Pretty soon, everyone in the village had had a good look at the slides. I'm sure none of the villagers had ever seen a transparency before. Just one sweet cup of tea. With the trust of the chief and the villagers, we had complete access and we were free to work. We slept in hammocks in one of the open-sided village houses and got up at dawn to catch the village life. This is the chief's eldest son decorating an arrow. First thing every morning, the Ashaninka would make up their faces using red paste from an arucum plant and fire black to express their mood. The men were as keen on their appearance as the women. It's actually a lovely thing to watch people do. And every day they would put on a different makeup. This is a young mother washing her baby. And here, a good part of the village is traveling downstream to visit another Ashaninka community. Women relaxing with their children. And boys playing with a solid football made from rubber tapped from a local tree. I was using Nikon 801s at the time. I had 2 with me, and this boy's taking a picture with one of my cameras. So generally they didn't farm, hardly any farming. Mostly it was hunting for fish from the river and game in the forest. So this is hunting for fish. And we stayed in the village for 2 weeks, spending 1 full week with this community and going upriver to another tribal community to shoot the BBC video. And people became quite relaxed with us being there. Just climbing a creeper in the forest to sight game and hunting in the forest. And here's an Ashaninka boy practicing his skill with an arrow designed to take out birds. He's got a fat tip at the end. It rained a lot of the time, and when it rain does calm down. This is a young family with their first baby, and it's a misnomer to call these people primitive. In many, many ways, this community was just as sophisticated as our first world societies. This is an Ashaninka girl with a wild boar piglet that she's going to raise after the mother was killed in a hunt in the forest. This is the village chief on a hunt in the forest. He knew all the plants in the forest and how to use them. I felt it was a real privilege to be able to spend time with him and with the Ashaninka community. This was the cover story in the Telegraph. The story then sold through our agency network photographers to foreign magazines many times. So here, by establishing trust with the chief through the aid agency Health Unlimited that we traveled with, and through my own set of pictures from a previous trip, we were able to make the most of the opportunity that we had being there. This is the story on pirates in the South China Seas. I'd seen a short article about problems pirates were causing to shipping in the Far East, citing information from the International Maritime Bureau. They had an office in London and I went to see them. And they had the Bureau offered to set me up to photograph anti-piracy operations in Singapore and the Philippines. But I told him I needed to photograph pirates to get anything published. And he sent me off on a long trail, which led me eventually to a bar owner in Manila, who said that for a fee, he could get me on board a pirate boat. In all, it took 9 months to set this up. And there was no pictures of pirates anywhere at the time, and the Telegraph magazine agreed to back the story. So here we're on the boat, and it's unmarked, and it was on a fishing village. It was off a fishing village in one of the Philippines' most southerly islands. I was with a journalist from the Telegraph and the bar owner, and there was a crew of 4 pirates, and their primary targets were boats smuggling goods into Borneo from the south. As smugglers, are unlikely to report crimes to the Coast Guard. These guys felt relatively safe. On the right is Captain Ronnie. In the middle is second in command Big Boy, and Tony on the left. I was quite pleased to get this kind of composition to work. This is Big Boy. He and Captain Ronnie were butchers from a small village on the island, but times were tough, and then agreed to become pirates for a local criminal who ran 2 pirate boats. This is navigating in shallow waters. Ronnie with a watch he picked up on a recent raid. Here they'd stopped at a sandbar to dig for crabs. Ronnie offered to go on a raid for us, but we were very clear we didn't want this. It's one thing to photograph pirates, but we'd be crossing a very important line if we instigated or participated in a crime. It's Ronnie taking a nap in the cabin. Big Boy spinning the barrel of his pistol, and Tony with an M16. And they told us that when they attacked other boats, most people gave up without a fight. It's being rowed back in the dugout at the end of the day. In total, I spent 5 weeks on this story, doing anti-piracy operations in Singapore, the Philippines, and Indonesia. This is Emilio Chango in the high security prison in Manila, and he'd been involved in some high-level piracy, capturing ships at sea, evicting the crews, selling the cargoes on and the ships. He was captured in a run-through traffic in Manila, they told me. Anyway, 2 weeks after I took this picture, he was shot while trying to escape. It's Emilio's brother. This is the Philippines Coast Guard checking out a fishing boat. This is a fisherman waiting to be hired. And he said he'd lost so many of his fishing boats to pirates, he didn't want to have his own fishing boat anymore. Often the fishermen would get thrown overboard by the pirates, and quite a lot of people actually don't survive the experience. This is the Malacca Straits, seen from Singapore. Most international shipping passes through this narrow shipping lane, and many believe pirates based on the Indonesian islands of Bintan and Bataan in the distance were responsible for the night attacks on large shipping. This very grainy picture is shows one of the ship's defences, spraying water cannon over the bow through the night. Yeah, obviously, if I shot this on digital, I get a much better picture now, or if in fact it was any moonlight, which there wasn't that night. But at the time, there's no good fast color film, and there was no possibility of a time exposure because it was on a moving boat and a moving sea. This is an anti-piracy training exercise in Singapore. They took it all very seriously. This is theatric, but it does look realistic. This is also part of the training. I was made very sure that the picture captions made it clear that this was all a training exercise. We managed eventually to get to the Indonesian island of Bintan, opposite Singapore on the Malacca Straits, through which the vast amount of shipping passes. This is a small high-speed launch to it's carrying passengers, but the Indonesian pirates use very similar boats to attack international shipping. This is an Indonesian pirate in custody. He didn't want his face shown. I asked Indonesians if I could go on a patrol, and the Navy had just been given a fast boat by the Dutch, and I rode on the deck with this young rating. It was a cloudy night with a flat sea and pitch black except for the ship's lights. As we raced along, the rating and I both realized that we were heading straight for something that was very large and black, and we banged on the windscreen. Inside, the crew were getting drunk on canned beer, and just in time, the captain slammed the engine into reverse, and we stopped feet away from a huge barge without lights that was being towed by a large tug. The captain was embarrassed. He climbed aboard the tug and knocked out the pilot of the barge with his fist before arresting him. The story sold over and over, partly because for several years there were no other pictures, stories on pirates. This is in a Dutch magazine, but I got tear sheets from many countries. Anyway, I hope these 4 stories have shown how getting people's trust and permission to be there gives you the access you need to work so that you can make the best of the opportunities you've created to generate good images. So there we are, Jay.
Brilliant, Mike. Thank you for that insight. So something we very rarely get to see or understand on how the images sort of come to effect in the first place. I've got a whole range of questions for you, Mike.
Great.
The first one that I want to ask, the first one I'm going to ask is obviously we've spanned a time period, as you've said. You know, the London Underground was before you got into the photojournalism, and it spanned sort of 10 years, as you said with your book title there. Obviously, I believe you're still a Londoner. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
How would you think, compared to back then to now, it would change it with regards to shooting in the underground? Are you aware? Is it still the same? Is it allowed, or would you be still doing it in exactly the same way you did it back then?
I think people are generally much more relaxed. I mean, I think the staff are generally much more relaxed because, I mean, you can't stop everybody taking a picture on their mobile phone, and people are doing it all the time, especially, I mean, in the days when we had tourists, before the days of COVID, and the place was packed with tourists, people would be doing it all the time. I think the key thing, I think the one thing about working on underground is that you can't use a tripod because that basically obstructs the platforms. But I think equally people perhaps more wary about having their picture taken. You do see people taking pictures and getting great pictures on the underground. If you follow Instagram, you'll find links to lots of fine work that's been done recently down there. So it's it's basically I think it is the street underground, and all of life's rich and varied humanity does come through there at different times. You're just looking for interesting moments, which are always happening. But right now, I was on the underground yesterday, and it's virtually empty. Virtually empty. I mean, very, very few people down there right at this present moment.
Yeah, strange times.
Which says a lot about COVID, actually.
Yeah. Strange times for all of us, indeed. So with, obviously you mentioned quite, well, we'll stick with the underground for a minute. You mentioned
Yes.
that obviously back then it was very much a verbal thing, or it could have been a simply, glance of the eye as such, or no, with the 3 people that you were sat opposite, didn't stop you but didn't say anything. Do you think that would be different today, though, if you were planning to use the images? Would you be expected to get permission now, do you think, Mike?
Well, I mean, the whole thing about model release forms, or certainly wasn't. No one ever heard of a model release form except in the advertising in those days. Now, I think if you want to publish the pictures, then I think it would be advisable to have a model release and just say, first thing is, are you happy to have your picture taken? Next thing is, do you mind signing this model release form? And then you get into a whole dialogue about how you can use the pictures. Generally, when you bring out the model release form, people shy away.
Yeah.
But if they have the time to listen and you explain what the project's about, and it's you can show them the picture on the back of your camera these days with digital. So if they like the picture and they're happy, I mean, it's just the whole different set of negotiations that are required. But generally, I think if people want to use it, if you want to use the picture, I think, and the person is clearly the main character in the frame, then I think you owe it to them to let them know how you're going to use it.
No, agreed. I mean, I can share you 2 instances with the Academy. We've done quite a lot of street photography on the Academy with some of our teachers there. Mark, obviously, who runs the Academy, we were out on the streets of Cardiff once, and this was the days where I still made the films. I don't do them anymore. Somebody else does for us. But a lady was in a big shot. She wasn't a focus of anything, but she'd seen that we'd taken the picture, and she wasn't happy about it. And she'd come over and she was like, I want to see it deleted. And Mark said, no problem. And we did. And then she just wouldn't let it lie, and she actually called over who happened to be, a patrolling policeman, and we just explained. We had a video camera. I was filming him. Mark was taking photographs too, so we were doing teaching on street photography. We'd explained we deleted the image. We showed the policeman that there was no image. This woman was screaming that she wanted the card out of the camera, or the actual whole card deleted, and the policeman went to her, no, love, he's completed your picture, he's deleted your image, I can see there are no more of you, and he has already agreed that he won't take any more pictures of you. But she proceeded to stalk us for about 20 minutes and get in the way of all the shots that we tried to take until she gave up. So, we went and had a cup of tea. Just, right, okay, we'll have a cup of tea.
Absolutely the best thing to do in that circumstances. Change the paradigm.
But interesting,
go for a cup of tea.
Absolutely. But interesting, you said about permission. I spent a couple of week up in Scotland with one of our other teachers, who was also a keen, and we walked the streets of Edinburgh we weren't just looking for the norm, Mike. We were looking for the interesting. We were looking, Kenny wanted to do street portraits rather than just capture the street. And we called. I think we ended up calling the film. It's on the Academy if anybody wants to go and see it. But I think we called it 13 People or something like that. So in this film, we actually asked 15 people if we could take their portraits, but in the situations that we found them in. So it wasn't that we were staging it. Kenny saw something that he wanted to photograph, and we went there. And out of the 15 people, I think we ended up calling it 13 because 13 of them said yes without any problems whatsoever. But that's
a pretty good hit rate, I'd say. That's a very good hit rate. 15,
I think.
13 out of 15.
Again, I had a video camera, on a monopod. Kenny was there, and he shot medium format, so it wasn't a tiny camera at the time. But just explaining to them that we were teaching photography, and that's what we were doing. We were making a teaching film, and we wanted to capture that image. We thought it was a great image, and 13 out of 15. So it's just that, like you said, and Kenny he had his card with him, and he said, "Of course, I'll give you the images. I'll send you the images." And
it's about trust, really. It's about trust and the lack of trust, and ultimately, what's the opposite of trust? In the sense, it's paranoia. So why are people so worried to have their picture taken? What is the thought that
it probably helped that we both
themselves to be abused in some way?
We both had Photographer Academy jackets on, and we had our work shirts on, and we had the cards. But was. I was amazed because we'd had a little bit of a bet at having breakfast that morning, going right. We'll aim for. I think the original plan was 20 people we were going to ask, and I said, I reckon you'll get third say yes, and he went, no, I'm going to get he said, but I'm Welsh and I'm not Scottish. He said, you're on my patch now, Jay. He said, we'll have more than that as Scots, we're more welcoming than the Welsh. And it was 13 out of 15. Brilliant.
Right.
Oh, there we go. We've got a few things coming into the chat panel as we talk, Mike. In Dublin, not so long ago, I was photographing, and over the tannoy at the rail station, unless I could show I purchased I was told to stop unless I could show I purchased a license. So obviously different, you know, just like you said though, isn't it? It's talking to the right people at times, but you will discover these sort of jobs worths who are like, no, you can't do it on that.
A lot of places, I mean, equally, I mean, more and more places are becoming bought up by corporates. So, for instance, you can't photograph in Canary Wharf without permission. You pick up a camera in Canary Wharf, and some security guard will, within 5 minutes, will be on you.
Yeah.
You got permission. I mean, it's, you know, you're on the street, but why is that area you can't get work there, because whereas you can on Oxford Street? It's absurd, but that's the reality. So you have to deal with it.
I've been turned away from Canary Wharf. That's a whole nother story. While photographing and filming with one of our photographers. Right, back to my questions for you, Mike.
Yes.
There was a question here. 10 years. Why 10 years? Or, you know, it was a personal project. That was staying with the underground. Sorry, that was just while you were honing your skills, was it? Or
well, the truth was, I did this in between many other things. At the time, I was running a photographic gallery called Half Moon Gallery, which then became Half Moon Photography Workshop, and we published a magazine called Camera Work, which a few of you may know of, and that was a 110% commitment. So it was really full time. So I didn't have much time to go out and street shooting or working on the underground. So I grabbed the odd day when I had it to go down the underground in the mid 1970s. So that's why it took 10 years. And I just, in a sense, I didn't stop. I didn't finish the project. I just stopped the project when I started my freelance career. And it's only when I went back to look at it all, I realized actually I got a body of work that stood up. So it was really like that. So 10 years, I mean, obviously you could do it in 10 weeks or 10 days, but probably wouldn't get enough images in 10 days. But these kind of pictures arrive by spending time and also by being zoned in. That's the other thing, actually. Being zoned in is quite important. So what does that mean? That means being aware of what's going on around you and being in tune with what you're looking for. And that's being, in a sense, being in the zone. And it's not something that happens all the time. You have to be in the right headspace to do that. And looking at contact sheets there afterwards, you can go through, I mean, it's all black and white, but of course you could do that with digital now, just going through what you've shot. But if you look at the contact sheet, you go through a series of contact sheets on a particular day, and you can see that on some days you've got almost nothing, and on another day you've got maybe half a dozen or even 10 pictures that are crackers. So really good images. So why is that? It's because you've somehow tuned into your observability, your sense of what makes good images. In a sense, you're working to the best of your ability, and you always want to get into that zone whenever you pick up a camera. That doesn't always happen, but the more practice you get, the more professional you are at what you do, the more you can muster that creativity to. I mean, ultimately, it's about, in a way, it's about predicting the future, because you see a situation that's got potential. So then what do? You just stand there with a camera? Do you raise the camera to your eye? Where are you going to put yourself? Where are you going to position yourself so that you can capture the moment that you think is going to happen at the place where the composition is going to work? And that's not trivial, actually. And that's, and after a while, you begin to realize you do this kind of stuff intuitively. But in a sense, I think all photographers, in a way, are predicting the future. That can be in the next 5 seconds or the next 5 hours. Where's that cloud going to go in my landscape? When's the sun going to come out? Where's the shadow going to be? All these things are about predicting what's going to happen next. Because if you've seen it, it's too late because it's already gone. So you've got to get that instant when you're ready to take it.
So what was interesting for me, I think this is the last question I've got on the underground before we move on to the other projects. You obviously you mentioned that you took the book to the publishers. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
So what made you? Was there something that you thought, right? Okay, this is a chance that it could be a book. What made that decision, or did you always feel that you wanted to get it? You thought it was something like that eventually.
I was going through my archive. I just looking through stuff, and I came. I've also had a lot of pictures in various filing cabinets here. And I was going through pictures for some other reason. I just saw these underground pictures that I hadn't looked at for a long time, and I thought, oh, maybe I should go back through the contacts and see what I've actually got here. So it took a little while, but then when I did it and I scanned the pictures, I realized actually I got a nice set. And I probably scanned about 180, and then we do that down, and then I think it was about 85 pictures in the book. And I was pleased with what Hodgson did with it, and the nicely reproduced. And it got an enormous amount of play when it came out. In so many, he even got a Sun ran a spread, and I mean, on online connections. I mean, I got about 15 different magazines ran links to the set, so we did get a lot of publicity.
Were they the only publisher that you went to, Mike, or
Yes. Yeah, I just went to them because it seemed to fit with. They had this. I just like the ethos of the publisher, and I was able to work with them on the design. Just the whole thing. It felt like it was a collaboration.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. So it's something that you would, if somebody felt that they had a kind of body of work, it would be worth putting it in front of the likes of these, not your particular publisher, but worth not ignoring it or thinking that'll never get published. Do you see what I'm getting at?
There's lots of different ways of publishing. Publishing these days. Sorry, I got a frog. There are lots of different ways of publishing these days. You can self-publish. You can do it through Blurb or through Bob's Books. You can put and then you can generate your own book and then put it up on a lot of these outfits have links to
selling platforms.
Yeah, exactly. So you can so they can be sold through those platforms like Amazon, or you can take the book to your set of pictures or the whole concept. I mean, there are a bunch of different publishers out there. You can just Google to find them. Some of them charge you some money, some charge a lot, some pay you. I mean, it depends upon, ultimately it's a commercial operation. So they need to think that they can sell enough books to cover the cost of the production, and the production costs are not small.
We have as mentioned, and a lot of the people watching will know that outside of the Photographer Academy, we also look after 100 studios that we look after with business mentoring, and we run an annual portrait competition just purely to create awareness and marketing. And one of our dog photographers was a finalist in last year's awards, and got it into his local newspaper that he was just a finalist. He hadn't won with the image. It was quite a unique. I say unique. He shoots through glass, so the dog was on the grass and he was underneath, and it's a whole thing's called Underdog. But he got it published in his local paper in Gloucester, and somebody picked it up on the online version on a train, who happened to be, I don't know what the term is, Mike, you know better than me, but he was like a finder for a publishing house in London. And it was very much became a coffee table book, but they approached him, asked him if he had enough to make this book. It got released just before Christmas in the UK. I know he had a massive advance, I say a massive advance, a good advance, so no cost to him. But he had an advance on the UK release, and then excuse me, I've got the frog as well now, Mike, sorry. And just before Christmas, he had the call from them saying that it was going to be published in America, and had a check twice the size for the American release, which is going to happen later this year. So it's amazing that, and he'd never thought about it, and inspired one of our portrait masters who teaches on the academy, who'd never thought about publishing, to put his work in front of some publishers. And actually, when I believe now one of David's books is in production just by doing what we've just said, putting it in front of a few publishers, and it is happening for them. So really interesting that you went down that route. Right, I want to get into, you're okay, we're okay for time anyway, Mike. There was a couple of questions, and I wanted to ask this question as well. And I know that, as I said, when you and I getting to know each other, that I was quite interested in documentary photography myself. I remember reading an amazing book. I'm sure you've heard of it, The Bang Bang Club. Obviously about the war photographers. And my question, seeing you in places, I know that obviously the Agent Orange was after the event. There was what was significant to me and came across in some of the questions is the Agent Orange. I know you were documented. I know you couldn't show us graphically some of it, but we saw a young lad shot, so he was dead. I get that fully. But then obviously you somewhere along the line, or was it part of the commission or your plan with the journalist? Because there were very much portraits of the families and their children, weren't they, as well, rather than a documentary. Was that a decision from you, or was that a decision from the person that you were with, the reporter?
As I said before, that that story on Agent Orange was entirely my idea, and I didn't have a journalist with me.
Oh, sorry.
I chose, and also I mentioned that because we were out in the villages, and the travel time from Hanoi to the villages is significant. So by the time we get to the village, you miss the best light of the day, and being in a tropical climate, the sun is quite strong. And using Kodachrome film, the latitude of the Kodachrome is 2 stops. So either you can use fill-in flash in daylight, or you need to do the pictures indoors. So I chose to do portraits. And in a way, the portraits, I think, convey something about what people have gone through.
Yeah.
And so I think in a documentary style, you wouldn't necessarily catch that. Obviously, I mean, I could have wandered down the Ho Chi Minh Trail and taken pictures of the forest, but a lot of it would have come back. And really, in a way, the story for me was about what people had suffered as a result of being damaged by the chemicals.
Yeah,
and that was what made the picture set for me. And I also got, I got stuff of babies in formaldehyde and all that kind of thing, which is quite tough to look at. So I didn't include those pictures, and there's other deformed children. But in a way, go on and on. I did shoot a lot of stuff, but I just showed a selection today.
So it leads me on to a technical question that I never thought of, because we've talked obviously heavily about the projects that we've clearly seen today have been shot on film. When you're out there for these lengths of time, are you processing the film while you're there, Mike, or are they literally sitting in a bag until you get home?
I know the Kodachrome particularly, or black and white, I suppose. Basically, I always brought the film back or sent it by courier or by DHL or courier to London or to New York, or depending on the story. There's Kodachrome's no way you could process that yourself. You need a factory the size of your church to do the processing, and the Kodachrome, of course, you can't get it anymore. It's no longer being processed. But then, of course, right now with digital, you don't need that. So, in a sense, when you're working on film, you've got no idea what you've got. I mean, you know what you've got. I mean, you feel it in your bones when you know you've got a good picture. You just hope that the alchemy of the chemical process does do what you expect it to do, and you get the pictures in the end. I mean, going through transparencies, when you get them back from the lab, you've got your boxes of Kodachrome, you open them up on the light box and you're going through them. And it's a process, and you're going through them, and this one's in the bin, that one's in the bin, that one's a good one, that one's a good one. And you end up with the first edit, and then you go through the first edit and pick out the best pictures, and then you start to structure your story from the images you've got. But you can never, it's always in your mind what you've got and the notes you make as to what the images are. I mean, for this story on the pirates, I mean, it was 5 weeks away, and of course I never saw a single picture until I got back.
Yeah.
I mean, other stories, sometimes I'd ship film, and I remember one story I did in Eritrea. Actually, it was Tigray province, which is currently under conflict. But I was in Tigray, and I shot about 2 weeks' work, and I was covering the famine. And I met some Dutch people who were going out, and I gave them my film, and they got the film back to London. We got it processed, and Network got it out to Time magazine. When I came out, it was like 2 months afterwards, on the newsstand in Khartoum were my pictures in Time magazine. So that was quite nice. So it's you obviously the whole thing about processing is except for black and white, you could process black and white, but that I never did. Other people, and if you're stationed somewhere as a local bureau photographer, and you would be processing your black and white and sending them by wire. But that was a very limiting way to work. And working as a freelance, I could be much more control of my time, which I would much preferred.
Very different business today then, obviously, with the world of digital. But I suppose in some of these remote locations, you still have it. You'll see them, but not always as easy to get them back, I guess. But very more.
Well,
sorry, Mate, you go on.
I think now you've got to be in a very remote place not to be able to get stuff back. I mean, if it was urgent, then you'd take a sat phone with you. I remember doing a story just at the beginning of digital it's actually for Christian Aid, and it's about the cyclone in Orissa. And I took a sat phone, and I had an early digital Canon Kodak camera, great big clunky thing. Anyway, at the end of the day, I would go through the pictures on my laptop and transmit from there. There was no internet in the village I was in, but with the with the satellite phone, I could get a sighting on a satellite and transmit the pictures. So I think almost anywhere now, you'd be expected to be able to ship if the client required it.
I'd like to ask you some questions about being in the situations, not just from me, but they have come from the attendees with us. How do you feel when you're in these situations, Mike? Can you share your feelings when you're around these people? Let's stay with the pirates then. Was there any element of fear on your behalf?
Well, when we first got onto the pirate boat, there was a bit of a tension between ourselves. They weren't quite sure how to behave with us. We weren't quite sure how to behave with them. But then after chatting for a while, everything relaxed. I mean, basically, really clear we didn't want to go on any raiding parties. So really, then it was just about spending the day together. And they were, after a while, they relaxed and just got on with what they were going to do. And that was the best thing for me.
So back to your core message of gaining trust.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think where situations are more tense or more difficult, or for instance, I mean, I think in conflict situations, you have to, every conflict's different, and you have to understand the lie of the land, and if possible, be with a local fixer, or certainly know what's going on. Because if you don't know what's going on, then you very easily put yourself in harm's way. But I think with any story, you have to ask yourself, well, what are you doing there? Why are you there?
Yeah.
And it's not a trivial question. And if you're taking the story seriously and you want to report on that story, then in a sense, you need to know how you're going to interpret that story and who you're going to trust, who's going to trust you, and how you're going to represent them, and how you're going to honor the people in the pictures. So that you can tell the story you want to tell. And sometimes there are goodies and baddies, and sometimes there's no goodies or baddies. It's just a shit show. And sometimes it's just you choose to put yourself in a particular area because you're curious about those people, and they turn out to be wonderful or not. And that's part of the joy of photography, is that gives you an excuse to be curious about the world and to put yourself in places you're curious about. And there are certain risks associated with that, and you have to be prepared to take those risks if you're going to do that kind of work.
Do you? This is a question from me to you, Mike. Do you think enough of these stories get told now?
No, I don't. But I mean, and I think the reason is that I think there's still an appetite to see these stories, but there's not an appetite to commission these stories. And and it comes down to economics, and it comes down to, in a sense, to people like Murdoch, who dumbed down the respect for photojournalism and promoted the trivialization of news with stuff like celebrity culture, which is so. I mean, some people love it. I find it wholly tedious. So and then on the economics, who's going to pay to do these stories? I mean, with network. So I put a story up to a magazine, and so the magazine might put up enough money for a week or 2 weeks work, and then we knew we could, once the story was published in a UK magazine or a German magazine or wherever, or American magazine, we would have the pictures we could sell on to other magazines. And in a sense, the first publication would be the kind of the showcase for the story. So then you knew that you'd earn some money from doing the story for the first publication, and then you'd earn some money from doing from the secondary sales. And that together would produce, that's an income. That's an income you can live on as a photojournalist. And you don't need to do the corporate work, which, the day rates for corporate work are much higher than the day rates for editorial work. But ultimately, corporate work it's for a client to illustrate their whatever it is that they want illustrating, whether it's the oil company that they are, or the whatever it can be. I mean, ultimately, those pictures, you shoot them to the best of your ability, and that's why they hire you. But ultimately, it's a corporate, and the images have limited lasting value. Whereas I think photojournalism intrinsically has a higher value because the pictures are about real world, and it's a snapshot of what happened at that time.
Thanks for that. I was always curious. I remember referring back to the Bang Bang Club and remembering that the guy who took that sad story, the guy who took the image of the Ethiopian child with the vulture, the very famous image, but he took his own life afterwards, because obviously I think he won a Pulitzer Prize with it, didn't he? I think I forgot the story right. But then he was asked afterwards, what happened to the child after the photograph, and he had no answer for it because he'd just taken the picture. He didn't know. I don't think that was what led him to obviously take his life. He'd been in very, but I remember hearing the story from one of his friends, just saying that he just couldn't live with it. For me, I'm kind of interested in it because I think it's important. I think photojournalism is important, and the reason I asked it is because I don't think we do get to see enough. But I was just from some, and I'm not in it like you are, so it was interesting for me to see, you know, how you felt on it. Mark here once came back from Sweden, and I'm really sorry that I don't know the photographer's name off the top of my head, but he'd gone to an exhibition, and he came back saying it was one of the most powerful exhibitions he had ever seen. And he did tell me the name of the photographer back then, and this is a good few years ago, and I promise that I'll find it for people to look up afterwards. I'll put it on the Facebook or something. Just a crazy thing, Mike, is that me and Mark's wife, Debbie, we always struggled to buy him gifts, you know, for his birthday or for Christmas. And we'd remembered how he'd raved about this photographer. So I Googled it, and he had a book. And I thought, well, I'll get him that for his birthday. And it arrived, it was wrapped and sealed. So I wrapped it up and I gave it to him. And then he said, thank you, when I gave it to him. And he went, did you look at it? I said, no, I didn't want to open it up, you know, because it's your birthday present. He said, oh, you need to have a look at this now, and you need to read the forward. And he just said it was one of the most powerful things he'd ever experienced, but I didn't do any of my homework, which I felt guilty about afterwards. I have since. But it was a gentleman who had photographed out where the warlords would viciously and horribly deface young women, and it was all portraits, and they were all beautiful portraits of these young women and some older women as well. And each page of the book had their own story, and with the book was a DVD of a film, a documentary made on it. I was heartbroken. I was absolutely heartbroken, like when I read their stories, but their stories were told, and then in the documentary it was shown then that they, at least in this area, they started to get some protection, and people were, you know, took notice and learned from it. And I know it still goes on.
Yes.
I know it hasn't been stopped, but it was to know that it, you know, it did make a difference. And these were young, powerful women, and most of them were smiling, Mike, you know, that how safe and you know, and living their lives. But I think it just goes to how important, you know, it is that the people like yourselves are out there covering these things. And it was amazing to me that, obviously, like you said, that right back at the beginning, it's freelance. So a lot of these things you're having to try and get off the ground. You know, there isn't money coming in. And I'm sure that's possibly still the same today, Mike. I'm sure you'd tell me if it was different.
Well, I'm sure it's more difficult now than it was when I was doing photojournalism as the main thing. I mean, most of the work I do now is corporate. I do have a few personal projects I'm working on.
Yeah.
But the truth is, or I know also now in COVID, you really, I mean, it has to be extremely local, whatever you're doing. Well, it doesn't always have to be. I mean, you can travel for work, but I mean, and some people do. I mean, but anyway, yeah, it's the truth is that there are few people commissioning. I think Telegraph magazine still commission quite a lot, but there are very few other magazines still commissioning decent picture stories. So it's a big commitment to make, and you may not make back the money you invested in doing the story these days, whereas in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, it was much easier to make decent picture sales. I mean, I have quite a lot of pictures on Alamy, and there's a picture library selling pictures. And in the early 2000s, pictures would sell for a good figure, and these days they sell for much, much less, because outfits like Photostock and other micro sites have reduced the price. So, and people like Murdoch have reduced also what they're prepared to pay. So, I mean, it's not as easy as it was, I think, to make a decent living as a photographer. You really have to work at it, but you can, and people do.
I've just got a couple of questions left for you, Mike.
Yes.
Question here: do you retain the copyright at all times?
I retain all the copyright, all my editorial work, and most of my corporate work. If people want to have a buyout, then I generally charge quite a lot more for the pictures.
Brilliant. And going right back to the beginning with the underground, obviously we just mentioned there about, obviously the book is now published. So there wasn't, was it just because of the time that that the images were taken. So, sorry, the image permissions of the people in it wasn't an issue for the book to be published at this time.
Well, I felt so. I mean, ultimately, the bottom line is: do these pictures denigrate any of the people in the pictures?
Yeah.
And I felt not. So I felt I was on fairly firm ground that anybody who saw their picture in the book would not be unhappy to see their picture included. And in fact, once the book was published, I got a lot of emails from people who said, was this my uncle? Was this my father? One woman, there's one picture which I didn't show actually of a train driver with a pipe in his mouth, which is in the book. And he's at Oxford Circus Station, and he's leaning out of the window with a pipe in his mouth. And she said that that's her father, and that he used to take her on the train, and sometimes on a Sunday, he'd take her on the train and let her drive the train, sitting on his lap. So that's quite funny.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So I presume, just staying on the same note, that the publishers had no issue with it. There was nothing that came up with it, or does it solely lie with you as the photographer, if anything came of it?
No, it ultimately just with me. It is my responsibility. But no one. I mean, I've had no issues with anybody because the book's been out for a year and a half now.
No, I'm sure. Brilliant. Mike, seriously, thank you for sharing this time with us. We've run over a little bit, but I knew we'd have questions, and what a fantastic insight. Somebody just put in there, I had a Nikon 801, a much underestimated camera. So there we go.
They were good, they were reliable, and they did keep going, even in the Amazon, even though it was high humidity and very wet, still they carried on working. So, and they were good machines.
Absolutely. Seriously, Mike, thank you so much for your time today, and I was so excited to share your stories, and so were the people that have been with us. So there's lots of praise that have come through to say thank you for giving us that insight. I was looking forward to it because I said I got a little bit of an interest in it, and just really interesting to hear your insights on that. So thank you. I know that you've said that if you'd have loads of stories, and there was lots of things we weren't able to share. So if they do demand to bring you back, I'm sure you'd be happy to give us a little bit more of your time on that. But incredible.
Sure. Yeah. We can do something else another time.
Absolutely. So, thank you so much. As we said earlier, so to have a look, what Mike's going on. Mike's website is mikegoldwater.com. That's the Blue Cube Productions. He mentioned about the outfit that he put together, so the networkphotographersonline.com. His book is available, as we said, from Hoxton Mini Press. The links are in the chat panel, guys. You will get a reminder emails from us tomorrow, and you can follow Mike on Instagram at Mike Goldwater, which I'll be doing after we've done this on that one, because I haven't signed up to that one then, Mike. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. As we said, if you want to check out Mike's article, it's in issue, I wrote it down, but I believe it's in issue 41. So we're on currently 48, but as I said, all of the issues are available from the magazine page, which I've shared in the chat panel, on your email that you'll get from us tomorrow. So if you go back and look for issue 41, that's the one that you'll find Mike's article in there on the London Underground project. And all of the other issues, including the latest one, are available from the magazine page on there. And get involved with us on Instagram if you'd like to be featured in it. And just to quickly remind us what else we've got going on this week. Mark's going to be shooting, I believe he's doing Fine Art Still Life from the studio live at 5 o'clock today on the YouTube channel. That's the Photography Academy YouTube channel at 5 o'clock. Tomorrow we have our landscape master photographer, Nigel Foster, back with us. And tomorrow, by demand, popular demand, I should say, not by demand, from our members, he's going to do another live landscape photography photo critique. And we've had some images in already. But if you want to take part and submit an image, then you can do that from the live events page on the Photographer Academy. And on Friday, we have another photojournalist with us. We have Roger Bosch coming from South Africa, and he's going to give us an insight to the apartheid that has been covered for many years. So it's definitely Photojournalism Week with us here on the Academy. And they're actually on the screen. As you know, Mike, is one of my favourite images from your Underground book. Absolutely love that image, as we were chatting the other day. I presume that the Underground could well be like that at the moment. You said you were travelling just yesterday on it.
Yes, pretty empty, actually, that particular picture, I had spent quite a bit of time trying to find where it was when I had to caption it for the book, and I finally tracked it down. It was in Monument, so it was quite nice to spot that picture again, to find the same location, and find the actual tunnel was almost the same, because so much of the architecture of the underground has changed since the 70s.
I can imagine. I love it. Absolutely love it. Again, from me to you, Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. It's still coming in on the chat panel, thanking you for your time. And as we said, we'll chat in the future. Laura's done a really good job of filling the palette for the next few weeks, but I'd definitely love to have you back and have you share some more of your journalism stories with our audience in the future. Thank you all for joining us. As always, guys, please stay safe in these times. And as I said, look out for the live events program on the Academy for more we've got going on there. Mike, again from me to you. Thank you, mate. Have a good day. Cheers, bud.
My pleasure.